Your spirit is made of spiritual substance, just like the body's made of physical substance. The two are joined at every part, so they interface everywhere. And spiritually, you can have something happen. He called it having the spiritual eyes open, like a covering was peeled off of his eyes, and that's what opened this connection. He said that this is actually a state in which people used to live. Everybody used to have this. I mean, it used to be that thousands of years ago or whenever. This is just how human beings were. You could see into the afterlife. You would get a lot of interaction with people that you knew who had died. You would get sort of direct revelation and dreams and things. But mostly we've shut that because of living in more self-centered and materialistic ways over generations kind of ruins that connection. But it's something that can be opened up in anyone. There's a mechanism.
Hi, welcome to Finding Foscata. I'm Sean. Today I want to bring to you a conversation that I had with Curtis Childs, who is a member of the Swedenborg Foundation and also a prominent YouTuber that I've been following his content for a long time. And if you're not familiar with Swedenborg, he was a 17th century inventor, businessman, mogul. Did a lot of things. He was a fantastically intelligent and productive man in his society. And when he was in his 50s, he had an experience where he found that he could experience both the living, tangible, physical world and the afterlife at the same time, and switch back and forth at will. And he went on to write about his experiences and wrote 30 odd volumes about life after death and what it's like and what we're here for and the nature of reality and all kinds of really fantastic things. Curtis Childs has dedicated his career to unpacking Swedenborg's teachings. And that's what he does on his YouTube channel. And he's got some really fascinating stuff. We had a fantastic conversation. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I think you will too. So without further ado, here's Curtis. There's a few things that I wanted to talk to you about specifically.
Sure.
And one is about heaven and hell. Because I was watching one of your videos a few days ago, because I've been like binging Curtis Childs stuff and Swedenborg stuff for the last few weeks. And one of the things that keeps coming up, or at least it triggers in my mind, is conversations about heaven and hell.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering if you can set me straight or give me, or maybe like expand on Swedenborg's perspective on what heaven and hell is. So in my hypothesis, from having studied psychology and near-death experiences and all these sorts of things, it seems to me as if when we are living our lives, whatever it is that we are in a vibrational alignment with, to use some of the new age terminology, tends to come to us. But we have the benefit of being in a physical realm. You know, we live in a realm of matter, so things are slowed down. But when we shed this body, and then that slowing down disappears. We don't have that anymore. And it seems like people, when they pass, if they're in a negative frame of mind, if they've lived their life from negativity and self-serving and blaming others, then when they pass, that just kind of like it seems to accelerate. And so, or if they've been generally positive, then also that seems to accelerate because you don't have the damper as you would of the physical world. Does that check out with what Swedenborg talks about? What are your thoughts on that?
I think that's a great summary of it. I think that totally checks out. Physical world as damper. It's like if you have like a Power Wheels little car that you want to give a kid, you want to make sure that thing doesn't go very fast, because if it does, we're in trouble. And I feel like the physical world in a lot of ways seems to function like that. It's like a gate on how fast you can go. So like you mentioned, the sort of attracting positive and negative things, but even just the filter between what you think and feel and what you say and do. There's a time in there when you can check yourself. Like I can have any kind of thought, a critical thought, negative, and I can have time before that comes out of my mouth to say, is that really what I want to say? Is that who I want? And I can get all kinds of negative feelings. I can sit there and stew, but I have the chance to think, do I really want to go out and do that? Am I according to Swedenborg, that's why we start in the physical world. That's why a human mind begins its development here, is because things here are slow and they're static, and you got to just kind of go and grind through life. It gives you a chance to regulate that stuff and chill out. So yes, heaven and hell. It seems weird to people, the idea that there is a heaven and is a hell, because why would it be like that? Everything in the physical world, if you look around, that it happens because of laws and structure. Like there's a reason why it happens that isn't just arbitrary. It's not God is just saying go here or go there. So I think what I hear from a lot of people who don't like the idea of heaven and hell is like, why would it be like that? So I like where Swedenborg starts, is like heaven and hell at their fundamental core is just states of mind or states of being, which is really like state of motivation. So the way he describes it, heaven is the pleasure you get in doing good. So anytime we were talking about kids, before this started, if you're saying, I've got my daughter here and I know that she would like it if I did this, and I do that thing, and then I watch her be happy, and I like that. I like that feeling. That's a state of heaven. Same thing with if I'm going to go and do my job well. If I say I'm going to my job today and I'm going to try to make it so the people that I touch in whatever way today, that I make their life better. If I'm fixing their car, I want to do it honestly and don't overcharge them, but I want to make sure that they're safe. So I'm really checking things because I'm thinking about their experience on the road and the people there. So that's heaven. Those are heaven. And so hell is the opposite of that. Hell is, Swedenborg calls it the pleasures of insanity, which I think is a great term for it. So hell is like revenge. There's this, if somebody wronged me, I can sit there and I'm ruminating over how I'm going to get them back, and I want to take that revenge. Hell is I want to dominate somebody, or I want to humiliate them, or anything to put myself above. There's a certain joy in that. That's what hell is. So throughout life, you kind of like, you get into one or the other or both, but eventually one of them kind of starts running things. Because if I am basically trying to be good and I care about people and I understand that they're kind of like me, they've got their own life and everything, the more I know that, the less I'm going to have a stomach for like, well, I couldn't just like, man, my wife just had her debit card compromised. So like somebody got it and it's just like, I'm going to take this money. And I was just thinking about like that person on the other end of that. So we canceled it and whatever, but we may have lost not that much money, but like a couple $100 or $200 or something like that. Which could be, but it's not gonna, we'll be okay. But still, like thinking about the person at the other end of that, they're just, I want this money, so I'm gonna take it. Well, do you have any sense of like what you could be doing to the person on the other end of that? You're taking their, like, I know you want that money for something, but that's evil. That's not good. And the more that you're generally good, the more you feel like, I could never do that to someone. Just like reach into someone's, what if they need that money for their next medical payment, or that like I would never do that. So the more you become good, the less you have a stomach for evil. And the more you get into what's evil. Let's say I'm doing that for a living, and I don't know this particular person that hacked her card. I don't know what they're facing in their life. You can never know for what's deep in someone else's heart. But just for example, say that they're doing that, they know that it's wrong, but they don't. But what you do is you justify it to yourself. You say, well, that person, whatever, some reason they don't need that money, or I deserve this for something, because you have to find a way to make it okay to yourself. And the more you do that and the more you get into that, the more the less, the more you've kind of built up this cloud of falsity, and then that shuts out the good. So there is sort of a natural clustering. Like good wants to cluster with good, bad wants to cluster with bad, and that is the process by which you're determining the character of your spirit over the course of your life. So when the physical body dies, and yeah, you move into the mental world or the spiritual world, if you want to call it that. It's almost a little more like, when it's not, according to Swedenborg, it's not dream-like, but you know how when you're in a dream, you just don't have much inhibition. You don't sit there and say, should I go here? What about if I do this? You just kind of go.
Mm-hmm.
The spirit world is a little more like that. Like it's more like if your thoughts and feelings were just kind of out there for everyone. So if you're in afterlife, the physical gate is gone, then yeah, you rush into whatever you loved. And there's Swedenborg talks about when after you die, he said he was shown that there's a process where you kind of sort it out. And if you're really, everyone you get to devote your life to whatever you want to, but if you're mostly devoting it to good things, you go through a process where you get rid of the negative things, because if the two are together, it'll cause you a bunch of distress. Same thing with negative things. If you're mostly devoted to negative things, so there's sort of it's like a centrifuge, when it'll spin, and the stuff that's the same weight will stick together. It's kind of like in you get centrifuged, and like all the stuff you're mainly devoted to, like, forms your core. And then, so if you have gone through your life and you're stealing people's debit cards, you don't care what you do to them, you love getting that money, you're living for gratification and all that, you've justified it, you just rush toward that stuff. You rush toward that stuff. And in the afterlife, it is like kind of law of attraction-y. Like naturally I go toward people who are like me. So
Right.
other people who love the same, love is really powerful there. So if other people love this same kind, if other people love stealing, like people can love stealing, you can love it because you love what it gets you. You love the rush of power that's from it. If there's other people who love the same kind, it's like you gravitate toward them.
Right.
And then if you love honesty, like if you love the opposite of that, where you've been in business for a while and you know what it is to treat people well, and you think there's real integrity in that, you gravitate towards those kind of people. So heaven is just like the big gravitation of everyone who is into what is like pro-social, what is good and kind, and then hell is the major gravitation into all that negativity. And from that, each of those people, a bunch of people living in those ways, kind of creates its own scene. So that this would be what Swedenborg calls heaven and hell. But yeah, I mean, fundamentally, it is that you have in the spiritual world, people are less inhibited. They more just go for what they want. There's less of this like reputation management, where here I might want to do something that's evil, but I don't want anyone to think I'm evil, so I won't do it. There's less of that. It's just like I'm more impulsive. All those conditions together lead to what Swedenborg calls heaven and hell. So heaven and hell is like every day you got little tastes of heaven and little tastes of hell. Like I have a chance.
Sorry to cut you off, but like one thing that I'm kind of picking up is we're living here on Earth, obviously, and we tend to think spatially and in terms of geography. So I think that a lot of people seem to think that, or there's been that language like heaven is up and hell is down. But I think that people tend to think that heaven and hell are places, like it's a place that you go. But what I'm coming to understand, I kind of picked this up for a little bit from what you're saying, and then from some of my own experiences, is that either one, it's just a state. So if it's true that everything is vibration and frequency, so just for context a little bit, I've been a student of Hermeticism for a long time. I first got a copy of the Kybalion maybe in like 2008, and then I've just I studied the Kybalion it kind of replaced my Bible study because it seemed to make more sense, So that became my touchstone document, if you will, where I compare other things against that to see how everything works. But because I tend to be a little more left-brained and think analytically, I work in an engineering field, so I want things to
Okay.
kind of make sense,
My dad's an engineer, so I
Okay.
know some people. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel your pain. My dad is too. So I got really good at translating engineer into regular person. Just trying to.
Oh, you do speak another language. Got it.
Yeah. I remember my dad. He so he's a fluid power engineer working on hydraulic systems, and he was talking about how they were testing a new hydraulic piston that they had designed, and they put too much pressure on it, and he said that due to the excessive pressure applied, the piston experienced excessive axial deformation. I'm like, so you bent it? He's like, yeah, I bent it.
Oh, yeah, that's a good way to put it. Yeah.
But anyway, but back up to like the Kabbalion and Hermeticism and all that. The way that I kind of picture heaven and hell is that everything is like a polarity, and or like a polarity of vibration or a polarity of mind, where I mean it all has to exist, but I would imagine that there wouldn't be any limits on that, right? I guess. And so what I'm hearing from what you're saying and from Swedenborg's teachings is that yeah, you're just going to be drawn to whatever polarity you're at.
Yeah.
But then there's something else too that I'm curious about, because I've also been learning a lot lately about the law of one. Are you familiar with that?
No, I've heard of it, but I don't know it well.
Yeah, I don't know it well either, but I'm a little bit skeptical. But there are some interesting things in there. So the premise is that the law of one is that there's a collective super consciousness group that somebody channeled, and it wrote down all these things about how the laws of the universe work.
Okay.
And a lot of it's really profound. Some of it's a little bit wonky and weird, but I'm on the fence about channeled works anyway. I'm not always sure what to make of them. But one of the things that came out of the law of one is that if you live your life predominantly in an attitude of service to others, then when you pass, you move upward, in your sort of soul spiritual evolution. But if you want to move downward or if not, if you want to, but in order to move downward in your soul spiritual evolution, you would have to live at something like 95% service to self. Uh, anyway, but I'm trying to piece that all together from what you're saying. Do you have any thoughts on that? I can see your gears grinding.
They're like I think one of them flew up. So okay, so you were talking about are heaven and hell places, or are they states of mind?
Yeah.
And I
Right.
think that what I understand from Swedenborg is that there's two dimensions of reality. There's the physical and then the spiritual.
Mhm.
And we are experiencing both of those right now, because the physical is the physical. Everybody knows that. And the spiritual is your mind. Like all your mental activity actually takes place spiritually. There's absolutely an interface with the brain. The way that the brain can, but it's sort of like I'm looking at a monitor right now. If you have a monitor and you can scroll through its like input sources, there's a HDMI 1, HDMI 2. It's like we've got the physical world, the physical body is like HDMI 1. And so we're receiving input from it right now. But you could switch that over, and then there's the whole spiritual input you're getting, because you have a spirit as well. And that's what like when somebody does channeling or has experiences like Swedenborg, it's like that part of you or your spirit like takes off the VR headset and looks at the room that's actually around it, and that stuff comes in. So there's two parts of I just want to say that because the two parts work differently. Like they what Swedenborg would call correspond. Like there are parallels in them, but they work differently. So physical world, time and space. Everything revolves around time and space. So if I'm going to go somewhere, I got to go and walk there. It's going to take me a certain amount of time, and that's the foundation of everything. Spiritual world doesn't have time and space. Instead, it has states of mind. And the states of mind there are what drive everything. So if you are in a good state of mind where you're being good and you love what's good, that you mentioned, like, you might move higher from that. There's not actually a literally higher, but the better state of mind is like the equivalent to higher spiritually. So we talk this way, like we have a sense of how this works, because if you say, like, I'm feeling really low today, it doesn't mean there's no such thing as it's not like you're closer to the ground, but you know that there's an analog or a parallel between low and feeling bad.
Right.
Or say, like, this, let's raise our minds to a higher state. Like,
Right. Yeah.
so we have a sense of, like, there's physical higher and lower. Nobody thinks, like, oh, let's go up to the 14th floor and then we'll think better thoughts. We know that those two aren't directly related, but yet they seamlessly, just, you talk about them the same way. So spiritually speaking, the state of mind is like the equivalent of space. So if you talk about heaven being a place that's higher than you, sure, that's a good way to talk about it. But what it really is a state of mind where the concepts and the motivations are higher. And hell is a state where the concepts and motivations are what you could call lower, like they're worse, they're more negative. And that's, so if you're in the spiritual world, like if you're actually there experiencing, if you're having an out-of-body experience or your body dies and you're there, that's what determines where you are in that world, is your state of mind. And it looks like you move around, and the experience of that world is a lot like this one, but the physics of, like, why you go where you go has to do much more with state of mind, and even like how things look there. Swedenborg would talk about the way the landscape is, the way the people look, the way the buildings are. All of that's related to the state of mind and heart in the people who are there. So there, it's like a consciousness-driven world, or what you love and what you believe has a huge impact on the surroundings there. Whereas here, not so much. It's how it's like money and effort and things that's what impacts the way that the world is around you. So they're parallel, but they're different. And hopefully that makes sense of like, that's the fundamental difference is there. It's like the state is what determines everything else. Whereas physically, it's the material that determines everything else.
How did you get into this stuff? Because, like, one of the early conversations the early email I think that we had was what kind of started me down this path was I guess you can call me a recovering Christian, maybe. Some people say that they have like religious trauma syndrome, stuff like that. And but I was raised fundamentalist Christian, just, in my family, the Southern Baptists were a little bit too liberal in their theology. Like we were like way over the edge.
Bunch of snowflakes. Yeah.
What's that?
Bunch of snowflakes.
Yeah. What are they? They don't. Yeah. Anyway, but and I think when I reached out to you too, like one of the things that I was working on, that I'm continually working on, is trying to unpack a lot of those sorts of things for myself, and trying to take some of these concepts that I've had. Like, one of the reasons I'm fascinated with heaven and hell is because from the time I was a small child, I was told that if you don't believe in Jesus Christ, then you're going to go to hell. If you don't say like the sinner's prayer and do exactly this and take the communion and get baptized, then when you leave, you're going to go to hell, and there's nothing to do for you.
Yeah.
And then concepts of the rapture and all that kind of stuff. And I hadn't realized how traumatizing that was until I started getting further and further away from it and can kind of see it from a larger perspective,
Yeah.
But I was reading some of your bio too, and it said that when you came across Swedenborg's work, or you had already been involved in a little bit, but you were struggling with some mental health crises and issues like that.
Mhm.
Um, can you tell me a little bit about that and like how that unfolded for you?
Yeah. So I was raised in a church environment as well, but mine was a Swedenborg-based church.
Oh,
So I've always been around Swedenborg.
oh,
And
okay.
it was like, so there are, okay, so Swedenborg, he he didn't start a church or anything. He never had like followers or all he did was write and publish. And so soon after he died, there was like groups of people, reading groups got together and people got into it. And at some point, I don't know exactly how long, people said, well, look, man, you could take this stuff and you could, right now we're surrounded by the church of the day and a lot of what Swedenborg, maybe the one, you could call him a Christian reformer in that a
Hmm.
lot of his material was a critique of the Christian church and how it had, um, well, he said that it was dead, that it had died. And I think
Hmm.
what you just led off with there would be a lot of the reason that he would say that. So the concepts that you were taught, that there's a hell of punishment and there are specific hoops you have to jump through, very particular ones to get there. Um, it sounds like that's not that good of ideas. I mean, you were saying here, like
Oh.
just hearing those things, it did not enrich your spirit. It did not make you happy. It did not like,
Mm-mm.
it actually sounds like those are destructive ideas.
Yeah,
And, and so
yeah.
just
It
go ahead.
seems like a weird thing. Sorry to cut you off. It seems a weird thing to me, looking back on it now, that well, using fear is just it's an effective short term motivation, and it seems like it's a great fear is a great way to control people. And like when you're training when you're training a puppy, like you don't want to use fear, you want to use positive reinforcement and snacks and things like
Yeah.
that. Otherwise, you end up having this cowering dog that isn't really good for much and is actually a little more dangerous than a well-trained dog.
Yeah.
Or and the same thing with children. Like I had a conversation with a lady, Christina Rodriguez, and a couple weeks ago, she's a parenting coach, and she talks about the importance of not positive reinforcement when you're raising children, but the idea of helping children understand the difference between preferable and less than preferable consequences. So the example that we use is, I would take my daughter out and she refused to wear a jacket. And I wanted her to have some autonomy, you know? So what I would do is I would just take a jacket and I would put it in the bag because I knew that she was going to be cold because it's, like 40 degrees outside.
They never
So
want to they never want to wear jackets. It's crazy.
yeah,
It's crazy.
so I would bring it with me so that when she was like, "Oh, daddy, I'm cold." I'm like, "Yeah, I knew you get cold, babe. And here's your jacket. Put it on." And then she's like, "Oh, that's why dad told me to bring a jacket." So I wasn't rewarding her for saying, "Oh, good girl, you came up, with this idea," but she got the natural positive consequences of somebody having planned ahead in her life and brought the coat. Anyway, I say all that because it seems like you said that Swedenborg said that the church was dead. Was that something he said, or was that a message that he received?
So by the time that he was writing stuff like that, he claimed all of his information was from heaven. So yeah,
Okay.
if he's seeing that, he's not, according to him, we can't know if it's true, but he's not speculating. He's seeing a spiritual reality and then reporting it.
It's funny that you say that. Well, I don't know if it's funny that you say that, but I've had this strange memory for a long time. It was 1999, and I was going through like a tough time in my marriage, and I was struggling with alcoholism, and just things were bonkers back then. And this is one of the times in my life when I had this pattern where I would get into like a really dark place, And then I would think, okay, well, I need to go back to the church. I need to come back to Jesus. I need to start praying again to the Bible and all that. And I would kind of cycle back and forth because when you go back into that world, there aren't any answers there. There's some, but they aren't always the answers that you need. And I remember praying one time and I heard a voice that kept saying, the spirit you're praying to is dead. Like it was like, and I remember I heard it the first time. I was like, that's creepy because I was alone in the house, but it was
Yeah.
like a voice that said it. And so I started praying again, and the voice came again and said, the spirit you're praying to is dead. And so I stopped praying. this is just too weird for me. I had to walk away.
Yeah.
But but that's interesting though, because I don't ever I've never talked about that before. But it's interesting that that same kind of message would have come through to Swedenborg.
Okay. So yeah, it's you just said there's no answers in it. You could go back there and you need help and you don't have any answers. And it's sitting there and telling you that God is the kind of being that's just going to crush you if you don't do everything perfect. And then you're contrasting that with how to actually do things well. You talked about training a dog. Think about yeah, I'm not good at I'm terrible at training dogs. We have dogs, they never do anything that they're supposed to do. And that's because I didn't train. And I can get frustrated, like, why don't you go over here? If you're going to train a dog through fear or something, as you said, it doesn't turn out right. But also if there was an audience watching and they saw me being harsh and training a dog through fear, nobody's going to be impressed. Everybody's going to be like, well, that guy's it. But if, let's say, we brought in the best dog trainer in the world, that he would have a way that there's love in it, and there's boundaries there, and there's rules, but there's love in them. Somehow he would master that and do that. So wouldn't God be that, but times a billion? That they would be to say God is simplistic and vengeful and sort of a cartoon character, that can't be how it is. And it also doesn't help. It doesn't do what it's supposed to do. Like, you were sitting there in the middle of those messages. That's not how love acts. What you can't do under threat of fear is develop love for something. Like, I can't, how am I going to love? Everybody knows, even anybody who's a Bible deep into the Bible knows that there's so much about love in there. Like, Jesus is constantly talking about, I love all this. Even God in the Old Testament is like, oh, I love you. I'm trying to gather you back to me. But we know about love that you cannot love in the presence of fear. So if I say, I love you so much, do you love me? If you don't, I'm going to kill you. It doesn't, like, which is the equivalent of eternal punishment in hell. I'm never going to know if I actually love you because there's a threat hanging over my head. So, love needs to have freedom in it. So I guess the church is dead because it's not teaching you who God really is, and it's not giving you the tools to actually follow what God wants you to do. Which is to love the neighbor as yourself, love God. So there's a couple of teachings that Swedenborg felt like were really destructive and had destroyed Christianity's ability to do what it was supposed to do. One of them was faith without love. It was the removal of the importance of love from religion. So, like, how do you know if you're a Christian or not? How do you know if you're a Christian or not? Well, do you go to church? Did you say that sinner's prayer? Like, it's all conceptual. It's all,
Right, yeah.
have you checked the box? Nowhere in everything Jesus said about, they'll know you're my disciples if you love one another. What are the two great commandments? Love God, love your neighbor, love one another as I have loved you. None of that. Everyone says, oh yeah, that's a part of it, but none of that. Nobody actually considers that like that's the litmus test. So it would ideas and concepts were that became the main thing, and the actual, like, become a good person and love people, it's like it's there, but it doesn't matter. Once you do that, the church becomes vulnerable to all kinds of harsh, destructive ways of being, and then everybody starts to not like it because you have experiences
Mm.
like you had where you feel like there's. I remember seeing somebody was doing a podcast one time, and they were like, "Well, they went to Catholic school, and the nuns were so mean there." And he was like, "Well, I don't know if there's God or not, but I know he's not like that." So I
Mm.
think that the church is dead. Church was dead. So according to Swedenborg, there's sort of a new what do you call it? A new church that can be born. But yeah, I mean, if you're in it and it's leading you to be miserable and traumatized, then something's wrong. That's a warning light that this is not actually the source of everything and the creator of our
Mm.
life.
Yeah,
Um, like that doesn't equate.
I heard somebody was talking about, there's this pastor that I catch once in a while on social media, and he does street preaching, and people will come up and challenge him with these different things. And a lady was being critical of the Bible because the Apostle Paul had a policy, or there's a verse saying that women shouldn't speak in church and that they should keep their heads covered. And you can imagine how a modern feminist would be like, hey, we can't speak in church, we got to keep our heads covered, and yada yada. But and fair enough, right? But the context of that passage, though, and this is one of the things that we lose a little bit, the part about the head covering is actually, I find it fascinating, because in that culture, in like the Roman, Greco-Roman culture, they didn't have the understanding that we do now of human anatomy. And they believed that a woman's hair was actually part of her reproductive system.
Huh.
And like the more like luxurious her hair was, because like something like in the hair would like draw the semen up and make the baby, and like inside a woman was all just kind of like spongy weird stuff, right? So in that culture, what women would do is they would have like these huge hair things with gold stuff and laced in, because they were advertising their sexual prowess.
I never knew
So
that.
when
Okay, got it.
Yeah, so when Paul was saying to the women, keep your heads covered, it was the same thing. Like in our context, it would be like, ladies, please don't come to church in a thong because it's
Right.
going to distract the guys.
Yep.
And we're here to worship. We're not here to be amazed at how incredible your hair is. You know,
Right. Right.
but um, yeah. Anyway, but I
Okay.
think a lot of it though, I think, and when you hear that, you're like, oh yeah, that makes way more sense than anything I.
What's the intent? What's the intent? Yeah, the
Yeah.
intent. If you're talking about um oh this is just here to control you and subvert you in whatever way, um
Right.
then of course you don't like it. Of course you don't like it. But
Yeah.
if the intent behind anything religious is for the good of all, how can we do something that's for the good of all? Whether or not you agree about the details of it is still okay. That seems more like God could be interested in that. If it's God,
Yeah.
it has to be that it's equally loving toward everyone. Isn't that the
Mhm.
nature of that's like fairness? And but if we're all the children of God in whatever way, it can't be that he's thinking about some of us more often or more than he's thinking about the other ones. It's got to be everybody. Everybody is the center of God's sort of love.
Mhm. Tell me more about the Swedenborg Church. What is that? Well, it's not a church per se, but
Well, no,
an
so
organization of people.
no, there is originally it was just reading groups, but at some point people thought, oh, this is great. The way that he re-explains things and the way that he the what it seems like the picture he saw makes a lot more sense, and this is a lot more loving and actionable, and this is what Christianity is missing and all that. So some people decided, well, we're going to start our own congregations that use these teachings to inform our Christianity rather than Lutheranism or Anglican Church or whatever was going on in whatever country they're in at the time.
Uh,
So since that time, it's always been pretty small, but there have been the churches that you will use Swedenborg as part of their teaching, just like you have like Mormons will use the Book of Mormon, or but we're really Lutherans will use Martin Luther's 95 Theses or whatever. So there's always been like a dual influence of Swedenborg on the world, and there's been like the churches that have always remained kind of small, and then there's just his influence through. He influenced a lot of writers and poets and architects and people who had a big impact on society. So, I was grew up in going to one of the churches in Michigan, going to a Swedenborg church. So I would be like, I'd go to church and they would have the Bible and they read some from the Bible. They'd also read from Swedenborg, and like the teachings were drawn from there. So he was always around, and I kind of liked it. I mean, I was into like reading and thinking, and I thought that was cool, and I liked it. I remember liking going there. My friends were there, so I would like to see that and everything. But when I got older, I started to actually need it, and it came alive for me at one point. I just remember pretty clearly. I was like at the top of the street where I lived, and I had been reading like a new translation of Swedenborg. And I remember this moment where I realized, oh, that's describing how my mind works. Like that's describing exactly what's going on for me here. And it became not just a cultural background that I had, but it became like a tool that I could use. And I did start to have mental struggles of some kind around 19. It was later diagnosed as like depression and anxiety and all that. But I just started to have really everything, all my thoughts were like racing and they're out of control, and they were negative all the time. And I had all these fears about everything. And I started to look toward religion or spirituality as like, is this part of a way out of this? And it was in there that I started to see Swedenborg is the map of how life works, and it's the map of how life makes sense and how to navigate things. And so that from then on, I began to really in earnest like try to figure out what it was saying, apply that to my life, and then I just kept working. Like it was like, oh, when I think these thoughts, it's way better than when I think the ones that just come to me in my brain. This is whenever I'm getting into these ideas and living by them, my life is better. So I started to really become into it. I never thought I would like talk about any kind of church stuff or Swedenborg stuff or on the internet. Like that was never like, I never thought that's going to be what I do. But it became so important to me and so impactful that I eventually felt like, oh, I've got to do this. Like everybody needs to know about this. And maybe not everyone will get into it, but if it can help other people like it helped me, then that's my contribution to the human race.
That's one of the things that has impressed me about your career, is that I forget when I saw this video, maybe a year or so ago, maybe, but you were talking about how it's a nonprofit, and you don't get like the ad revenue, you don't do any of that. You're not doing that for those reasons. You're doing this because you think it's the right thing to do to bring this message out, And when I started this YouTube channel a little more than a year ago, but I get wrapped around the axle around money. Like there's always like a shortage, and there's always like I always want to do something, trying to be motivated by the money, trying to generate the revenue coming in. And part of my journey and coming to where I am now is getting past that. And it was actually what you inspired me by saying that it's often more important to just do the thing. And if money comes, if money doesn't come, that's fine. But the important thing is to do whatever the work is. Like, are you familiar with Jordan Peterson?
Yep.
So he talks about don't be afraid to start poorly. And I tend to be a perfectionist, so I want just the right camera and just the right lights, and I got to get just the right guests, and I got to get all this like in place before I can do anything. Yeah. But then I thought, no, you just start doing it poorly, and then at least you're starting, and it starts the process going.
Yeah, everything. with YouTube, I feel like you just gotta try it and then
Yeah.
look and see what's working. So many things when I started on YouTube, I thought I would make this kind of video, but then it would usually be something I did not expect to do well, did well. And then, oops, okay,
Mm,
I'll go over there and do that. Swedenborg talks about providence, divine providence. So that everything is
mm,
there. There's the providence is like the guidance of God over everything. And you
mm.
usually can't tell what it's doing in the moment. But if you look back, you might be able to pick out where things went. I feel like that how I got to be where I am, it was I never had a master plan of this is how I'm
Mm.
going to get there. It was always like one thing sort of led to another, right place, right time. Um, I remember one time very distinctly, I had this thought of a video series I was going to make about Swedenborg, and I was going to do these animated videos that would be like 15 minutes, and they would explain the whole thing because I saw other channels sort of doing that, and I couldn't get that many views, and so I thought I'll switch over into doing that. In the meantime, I had like some subscribers on the channel, and I thought, well, I don't want them to leave and get too bored, so maybe I'll just like read Swedenborg's books to them
Mm.
to kill time. And that it turned out that was the thing that actually made our channel take off. So
Really?
it was the big I didn't
Mm.
think, but it was the long videos and the in-depth dives into it. That was when we started to get more numbers and things. So right place, right time. But what you're talking about with the doing the work, that would be Swedenborg would call that usefulness. So to have usefulness be the lead.
Mm.
Like I'm doing this thing and I'm thinking about the good that it does. The money is fine as long as it's in support of that. So if I go
Mm.
into this saying the reason that I want to do this is I want money, well, there's a couple problems with that. One is you're gonna cut corners and things. You don't really care about what you're doing, but also you're not happy. Like it doesn't make you happy. It doesn't make you
Mm.
happy. Because it's not the order of heaven. So there's three universal categories of love according to Swedenborg. So there's love of the self, love of your own self-image, love of the world, which would be any kind of material gratification, wealth included, and then there's love of usefulness, or he also calls it love of
Mm.
heaven sometimes.
Love of heaven?
Yeah, love of heaven, because heaven is usefulness. The state of heaven is a state of enjoying being useful to people. So
Oh, okay.
hell is when you have love of self on the top, then love of the world, then love of usefulness. So the point of everything I do in my life is myself. So I want to, and that can be different for different people, but it's basically I want to be powerful over other people. I want to be eminent. I want to, whatever it is, like when I'm thinking about what I do in this situation, when I'm thinking about this interview, all of that is like, what does it do for me? How do I become the
Mm.
person in the world? So, and then money and things, that's sort of a means to that. And then usefulness, like I don't really care how this interview affects anybody that watches it because it doesn't matter. That's sure that's there, but I will just use that as a means to the end. So I'll do things that seem good in order to get people to like me because that's what I really want is people like me.
Mm.
That's hell. You can have another
Oh.
version of hell that's love of the world on top, and then love of self, then love of usefulness. So that would be right. It's just money. So and not just money, but like, sure, the material gratification that comes from that, whatever kind of pleasure seeking hedonistic lifestyle. And so this is just to get me that. So I'd figure out the tips and tricks to get ad revenue, whatever it is. But that's the point. And the usefulness
Mm.
again is the bottom. So heaven, you don't have to get rid of the other two. You just have to have usefulness on the top. So why am I doing what I'm doing? Because I think it will do good. Like I think it
Mm.
will be helpful to people. And the more I know the kind of help, like for me with Swedenborg, when I'm in this state of heaven around it, I know, dude, I owe my life to this stuff. This has helped me in so much. I really feel like this is how I got to know what God is like. This is the
Mm.
clearest path I have to understanding God is through Swedenborg. It has been the concepts that have saved me and comforted me. And every time I need something, it's been my best friend. I that I owe it to these things, and I want the next person to have that same kind of help. That's the big reason why I'd be here, is that.
Mm.
So then absolutely below this, so that's love of usefulness on top. So love of the world comes next. Like you can't do it if you can't afford food. You can't do it if you, and also if you can't afford equipment and like there can be a good use, a good love of resources and more. Like if we get a big donation at this non-for-profit, it allows us to do more. Yeah, that's not why we're doing it, but you can love that for the sake of the usefulness. Like, why do I love the money? Because it will let me be more useful. That's why I love it. Or even if you say, I need to have good food. I need to be able to afford good food. Okay, great. Why? For the sake of, so I'll have like my mind is sharp and I can do that. So for the sake of the usefulness. And then love of self, it's there. It just got to be the thing that's most in check. So that's fine if I want people to like me. That's fine if I want to make a name for myself, if it's to serve the usefulness. And if I don't really, if that's not like, that's not what's keeping me warm, is like, look, I'm better than other people. But more, it's like, okay, yeah, I'll do what I need to do to make sure I'm in the right state to go and do this help. And the way, I think the only way I can really get there is to understand that God is the one who does good things. All the good that comes, all the skill we have, all the success we have, any of that, it's really God gets the credit for that, and I'm just like trying to play my little part in that. So that's what that would be the heaven way to approach it, and you can take that approach to anything in life. So everything's in there. You don't have to like renounce the world, live miserably. It's just what's the main point? What is everything else for? If the main point is usefulness, that's heaven. If the main point, if the reason we do everything is for self or for money, that's not heaven, because it will never really work that way. And everyone, think about it, everyone who we interact with is sort of assuming we're acting from heaven, meaning if they tune into a show like this, what they assume is that we're both here to try to give them something good, that we earnestly care about giving them some information that will help them. That's why they would tune in. If they knew, oh, we're just in this for the money, or we just are in it for our own reputation, why would they want to come and watch that? So it's just when I go to get my car fixed, I'm assuming when I go in there, these people are going to, what they want to do is fix my car. They don't want to overcharge me, right? That's sort of the tacit understanding when you enter into any agreement with anyone, is that you want them to be acting from heaven. When you see a politician on TV and they're giving a speech and they're saying, that what I care about is you, the voters. You hope that's true. I mean, that's what you would want, right? So I'm just saying that's the difference between heaven and hell. Like really, really simply put, is like heaven is, what's the point? If the point is goodness and love, then that's heaven.
While you were talking, I kept thinking about this idea of idolatry, and there's that commandment that says, put no engraven image before you. And I think a lot of people think of that as like, you don't get like a little statue of Buddha or whatever. But
yeah.
And then of course, like in Islam, they take that to the extreme. And have you ever been into a mosque or seen the inside of a mosque?
Yep.
I mean, they're beautiful. They're just like, they're ornate with the art, but there's no people. There's no like portraits or anything like that, and they're very, very strict about not depicting the Prophet Muhammad, right? And I had a conversation with somebody, I think it was, her name was I think it was Therese Tucker. I had a conversation with her. She's a channel, and we got really deep into the concept of idolatry, and how we as humans, we can confuse the symbol of the thing with the thing. Like and that's why the idolatry, and why the having the engraven images is so not having the engraven image is so important, because it keeps you focused on what the real thing is. And like thinking about money is that, even though I'm maybe not thinking about quarters and coins and dollars and digits and whatever,
but money sack with a dollar
the
sign.
money sack with the gold coins in it, like, but that can be what you're saying. What I hear you saying is you need to be focused on the usefulness of the money, not worshiping the money. Because in that case, whether it's the sack of gold or the digits on the screen or however many bitcoins you have, or whatever the physical or digital iteration of representation of money is, you can't worship that. When you focus on that, then you're focusing on the engraved image rather than focusing on the energy that can then flow you and the use that you can be as it moves through you into the world and you share it.
Yeah, exactly. It's like what's the intent of it? So if I, of course, if I got a lottery ticket and won $400 million, it's the difference between I would be so rich. Like if that's what I would be so rich, and what would I get? Like a yacht? Like I get all this stuff. That's one thing versus right now, if I said, if I had $400 million, here's the what I could do. Here's what I could do with that would help people. Like if let's say I'm devoted to this cause of I think it's important to spread Swedenborg, and I think that that's a good thing in the world. If I was thinking, man, if I had that money, I would build this like production studio that did this thing, and I would promote this, and I would get this out into the world, then that's fine. It's fine to want. It's fine to want and pursue trying to get resources to be more useful. Actually, Swedenborg talks about how what God tries to do is initially everybody starts with your love of self and love of money kind of leading you. That's just like the folly of youth. You just like you start there. That's just natural. What God tries to do is turn that into a love for usefulness. So not that you wouldn't want to try to succeed, but what you come to is I want to succeed so that I can do something good. It could be so that I can give a good life to my family, but even more beyond that, you get to the point where I want to do good in the world, and the more power I have in whatever form, the more good I can do. And that's great. That's heaven. You can be getting up in the morning and grinding really hard and trying to increase your wealth and position. But if you're saying I can do more good, the more of that I get, that's heaven,
I've got I spent a lot of time trying to manifest a lottery ticket, and especially when it's when it's getting at like the mega draw thing, whatever. When it's getting up towards $1 billion, I'm like, you know what? I'll throw in $10 because
that's right.
It if you don't play, your odds of winning are absolute zero.
Right.
But if I put $1 in, then it's like 1,000,000,000 to 1, which is better than zero.
So you're saying there's a chance.
Exactly. So you're saying there's a chance. Exactly. But yeah, I've got a whole list. I've already got the money all allocated. I know exactly what I would do with it, where it's going to go, and what charities I'm going to support, and what work I'm going to, I have like the whole thing, and it's all based on percentages, and I'll just take that. I'll take the chunk that I need to be able to just live off of the interest and do my thing and not have to worry about it. And then the rest of it, is going to go like World Vision and digging wells in developing countries and building schools in Africa. And yeah, like it would just be like just a cannon waterfall of money into like organizations and things that I just think are amazing and need to happen in the world,
Yeah.
But and then a lot of the work that I'm doing too is I had a lady ask me, this lady that I interviewed a couple weeks ago, and she asked me who my target audience was. And I hadn't really thought about it, but the answer I came up with was just me. Like I like having these conversations. I like learning these things. I like finding places in my heart where I have wounds and hangups and just or holes in my knowledge, and I like finding those things and then growing and becoming, but then sharing it and saying, hey, I had this awesome conversation with Curtis, and I learned this, and I helped, it healed this thing in me, and I learned more about heaven and hell, and I have more clarity, and you might like it too. So
yeah,
here you go. And I find that when I keep that as my motivation, it's just so much easier to just kind of keep doing it and moving forward.
I can feel the difference. I can feel the difference. So I've
Yeah.
been, as we were talking about, I've been doing YouTube and other social media platforms for a long time, for like almost 15 years. So of
Mm.
course I'm aware of numbers and how
Yeah.
many views do I get on things, and am I getting more views now than I used to get, or less views than I used to get. So that can definitely, you can get caught up in that, and that can be all you feel. But and sometimes that is, I'm just like, well, okay, well, this, I need to do something different topic so this will get more views. This is not working. I'm not happy with this. Um, that's one category of feeling, but there's a distinctly different feeling that I can get when I just love what it is that I'm saying.
Yeah.
That this is a good thing to say, and I believe it does good for the world. There's a
Mm.
different feeling. There's just a different feeling of that. It's almost like more of like a sacred kind of feeling of just
Yeah.
this. This is like it's like almost
Yeah.
worship. I'm turning on these cameras to like, and not, of course, like if nobody watches it, it's not useful. But the distinction is different. It's more of I love the thing itself. I remember hearing
Mm.
an interview with Jerry Seinfeld,
Mm.
and somebody was saying like, how do you stay sane after being famous? And he said, I fell in love with the work. I fell in love with the work,
Yeah.
and thought, yeah, that's good. So for him, the problem is not, is he getting enough views or not? Like he's got that, but he's trying to, how do you stay devoted to it? But I think it can apply to anybody and anything. Like you got to love the work. You got to love the work and what it does. Because that's just a different feeling. It's a different feeling, and
Yeah.
it it makes it so that it's a different kind of joy. It's a different kind of joy. And there's a different kind of joy in, there's a joy of like, am I doing a good job on YouTube, and does everyone think I'm cool? But then like particular comments you can get when you sort of think about that person, this is how this helped me in my life. And I think about their life and what's going on. There's a certain kind of joy with that. I think that's the joy
Yeah.
of heaven. And I can't turn that on all the time, but sometimes it happens. And I
Mhm.
realize, yeah, there's levels to this. This is like the beginning glimmers of what it's like to be in heaven, is when I'm in
Mm.
those states and I want to try to feed this and do it.
That's a good. Oh yeah, I like that because there is something about. I posted a video yesterday, and part of the reason why I do this too is because I'll get this concept, I'll get this kernel of an idea, and I'm an external processor. I need somebody to talk to so that I can like talk this through and hear myself and put things together and write down notes and research, get all these things together. And I don't really have anybody in my life who will sit down for long enough for me to lecture them, but so I've found that through making the videos that I can bring those ideas together better, and the one but for a long time I had so many limiting beliefs about whether or not anybody was going to hear it, or people would think I was crazy, or whatever the thing was. And so I didn't let myself fully go into it. But then, so yesterday I posted a video about the concept of what you want wants you. And I don't use the word provenance, but that would have been the perfect word to use in what I was trying to describe, is that sometimes there are just things that need to happen in the world, and certain people feel compelled to go and do them. Right. And that's kind of what you're talking about, is that like you felt so much satisfaction through and felt so much healing and positivity and just passion about Swedenborg's work that you just felt compelled to bring it out into the world. And in a way, so in my video, I compared it to trees and how trees spread their seeds around. Like the story of Jesus talked about the farmer who spread seeds, and some of the birds came and got them, and some grew and some didn't. Right. Well, I have this whole hypothesis around the concept of the I am and how that kind of fits into it. But what I think about is that, like in the parable of the sower, there's no sense in which the guy who was spreading seeds was particularly good at spreading seeds. Like Jesus didn't say he used just the right angle. He like placed them, he aimed for that. He was just spreading seeds, like just throwing them out there like you're throwing grass seeds,
Yeah, I never thought about that. He not at all, because he's like some of them. Oops, thorn patch. Oh, I just threw this into the road. Like, this guy must be an intern or
Yeah. Right. And but then doing this kind of work is the same thing. Like, I have no idea who is ever going to watch that video that I posted yesterday. No clue, you know, and or if they may see it today or they may see it in 15 years. Like, it's frankly none of my business. My job is to be the good farmer who's just chucking the seeds out. Like, I have this idea and I'm just going to throw it out there and say, like, you know, vaya con Dios, mi amigo, like, whatever God has to do with the seeds, none of my business, you know?
Yeah.
But there's also a sense in which, well, there's a whole other concept that I have about like what seeds are and what they represent. But the idea is that, Jesus has that other teaching where he says, if you have the faith of a mustard seed, then you can tell that mountain to go throw itself in the sea and it'll do it and nothing will be impossible for you. And growing up in the evangelical church, they said, well, he wasn't really serious about that because I've tried it or whatever, you know. But actually, one of the things that led me away from Christianity was starting to read just the red letter part of the gospel and saying, well, what did Jesus actually say? And then following that, you know. But there's this idea that one, how do I say this? The faith of the mustard seed that's the critical part, because what the mustard seed is doing is it's just sitting there and resonating. I am a mustard plant. I am a mustard plant. It's not saying I'm a mustard seed, it's saying I am a mustard plant. And then there's something about the cosmos, there's something about the universe that sees that as a portal. And then things move from the unreal to the real. But because it sits there with absolute faith in what it is, without any distractions, it's not wondering, am I actually a dandelion? Am I going to be like a fig tree? Like, I don't know. It's like, no, I am a mustard plant. Then that starts to naturally flow out of it. And I find that you alluded to the idea that doing this kind of work and bringing these kinds of ideas together is almost sacred. It's almost a form of worship. But I could see how, because I get like emotional, I get like driven to bring these ideas together. And if that feeling that I get is what heaven is like, then dude, sign me up all day long. Because it's a beautiful thing. It really is.
Yeah, it's like heaven. Well, because you're thinking about what type of impact are you hoping it has on the viewer? And I think when we're talking about things like this, we're trying to have a really high impact. Right? We're trying to have people come in and they're really touched, or a problem is solved for them, or a door is opened up in their mind. We're really trying to give them a great day, and I think that's part of the sacredness of it. It's different. I don't mind watching people talk about sports, but that's different. Like, it's a different impact. You're and you're not trying to hold this person on the deepest level. So I think that's part of what the sacred feel of it. And as far as like whether the work you do, where it goes, and what results it has, and I think this can apply to anyone, even whether you're doing online content or not, is that you don't know, and it's ultimately out of your hands. Who really didn't see much of an impact at all from their work was Swedenborg.
Mm-hmm.
Man, he was like a scientist, and he was very successful prior to his spiritual phase. But when he started putting these spiritual books out, there's a letter he wrote to someone that said, "Oh, I've only sold, it was like 4 books in 2 months or something," and but
he wasn't going to get that 100,000 subs plaque.
He didn't get it, man. He didn't even get he didn't even get make his money back at the publisher.
Yeah.
But I'm sure glad he did it. And ultimately, there's this idea of he has this whole description of what it is to be in what he calls the stream of providence, which is a state of mind where he says that I'll paraphrase it, but he says that when you're in the stream of providence, if you're raised to high positions and wealth, it doesn't make you think you're better than other people. And if you become dejected and have mean circumstances, it doesn't make you think you're less than other people, because you know that for all people, divine providence is in everything and it leads to a good end.
Hmm.
So you can try. He was trying very hard to do something he felt like was very important with these books. And just like each of us can try really hard to do good, but ultimately you gotta say like thy will be done. Because
Hmm.
maybe this is what you're gonna make me into, is a guy who talks about religious stuff, and that, or maybe not. Maybe there's another future for me. Ultimately, I hope you'll put me where I can be the most useful, you know.
Hmm. And where I can make my mortgage payment. That would also help.
The mortgage thing, please. No, it's Maslow. It's Maslow. You gotta have
Yeah.
those things taken care of, because if you're not useful to yourself, you can't be useful to anyone else.
Hmm.
Um, so definitely, but there's a simultaneous, like, I'm going to try really hard, and I know that God, you're going to do what you need to do in my life. Like, I'm going to keep trying, but I'm going to try to cultivate this feeling of like, hey, I know you got this, so do what you need to do.
As you were talking, I was thinking about other people whose work like nobody knew about until after they died, like Vincent van Gogh. Like
Mhm.
he was, people hated him, and he was a drunk, and he was a crazy person, and but he was also this quiet genius, and he was a prolific painter. And look at everything he's brought to the world, and never knew it. Or Nikola Tesla, he was suppressed, and he was kicked down, and he was beat down, but he just kept doing it, just kept doing that work. And now so many of his technologies are benefiting us today, and it's the same thing with Swedenborg. And that's the idea I was trying to convey in my video yesterday, is that you just have to do the thing, like whatever it is that you feel compelled to do it through love. And which is that's an important thing to talk about too, especially thinking about like the assassination attempt on Donald Trump. you know like you could be compelled to do something, but are you motivated by love? Are you motivated by hate? Are you motivated by fear?
Yeah.
And
Everybody,
how do you navigate that?
we, you got to, you got to police yourself. You got to police it, and you have to have something. Another thing about love of self, we talk about it. Why is it hell to have love of self on the top? Because if
Mm,
you think, well, I'm the greatest thing, so whatever notion comes into my head, if I get this feeling of I know I'm gonna go shoot somebody. If I think I'm the most important thing in the universe, well, then I'm gonna go with that because I thought it and I felt it, so I'm gonna go do it, and I'm gonna find a reason to justify it. If you
mm,
have heaven on the top, when you get some kind of idea or some kind of drive inside yourself, you check it against the word. So you check it against the spiritual teachings, and you say, is this, just because it's mine doesn't mean it's good. Is this really good? Or do I need to fight back against this desire inside
mm,
myself and say, no, I'm not letting that out into the world. I don't care how much I want to do it, because that's not good. Because everybody who's done everything that's terrible, they wanted to do it for some reason. So it
mm,
is up to us to, nobody else can get in there and do that. That's part of the main work that we have to do. It's like, yeah, go do good things, but the first step and the essential element of doing good things is to, nobody else can tell you how, but look inside yourself and tend that garden and say, like, do I need to cut some of these things down that are trying to grow here, because they're not going to grow into good trees.
mm. Have you ever had any kind of spiritual experience, OBEs, anything like
Yeah.
that?
No, nothing. I've had some dreams that would like seem, but not, I would say I'm just like regular guy, which is kind of cool,
Yeah.
because I feel like then I've obviously been deeply impacted by reading all of these people's spiritual experiences, but I feel like that's good, because I can kind of like, okay, if these experiences can help me and I don't have any spiritual experiences, then they can help anyone.
Mm. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, you don't have to be a surveyor in order to appreciate a good map.
That's right. You don't got to be able to play basketball in order to watch it, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I One of the things that drove me down this path too is that um when I retired from the Air Force, I went through a really, really dark period in my life. And I was struggling with alcoholism. And it was a very difficult transition for me. And in fact, it's one of the reasons why I stayed in the Air Force as long as I did, is because I knew that my transition back to civilian life would be really difficult. And so I stayed all the way up until they were like, you gotta go, man, because you're maxed out, you're done.
Yeah.
So and it was just as challenging and dark as I thought it was going to be. And one of the things I found when I was dealing with PTSD and the depression was psychedelics. And I there was a few books that had come out, and it was just kind of starting to become popular in the zeitgeist about mushrooms and um, mescaline and all this other sorts of things. Psychedelics went up, and so I did the research. I learned about it, like what it does, and I went and got myself some mushrooms, and I took my heroic dose, like Terrence McKenna says to do, and it really was a profoundly life changing experience. There's like Sean before that, and then Sean afterwards, because and this is one of the reasons I'm drawn to Swedenborg as well, is because I was taken out of my body. I like got up out of my body and went and explored and had all these experiences, and it was like I was gone for an entire lifetime. I saw so many things. And then but I remember coming back to my room and walking into my bedroom and seeing this weird, like, amorphous blob of kind of pinkish tannish weird stuff, and not knowing what it was, and standing there staring at it for a few minutes, and then realizing, oh, that's my body, that's me.
Yeah.
and and but then suddenly having this intense feeling of compassion for myself, and realizing that body was part of me, but I had been poisoning it with alcohol, and I had been poisoning it with bad foods, and I'd let it get just horribly overweight, and it was out of shape, and it was sad, and it was, but then just seeing all that I had done to it, and then not wanting to get back into it and live that life again, because I realized how much work I had to do to reverse the damage that had been done, you know. But
Yeah.
then just having that resolve and saying, all right, well, I can't stay out here. I can't stay out of my body. I'm gonna have to get back into it at some point, and then getting back in, and then that kind of started my journey of, all right, let's get rid of the alcohol, let's get rid of the smoking, let's get rid of the pornography, let's get rid of all those sorts of things, and start integrating. How do I say this? Integrating myself into myself, as it were, and becoming a whole person, mind, body, and spirit together. But what what fascinates me about Swedenborg, though, is that, from what I understand, is that he kind of lived in like dual worlds, right? Like he was kind of could he switch back and forth at will, or was it kind of like he could see both? Because I know your program is called like Above the Left Eye, right?
Yeah.
And and yeah, I'm trying. How do you conceptualize that? How do you visualize what
Yeah.
it was that he was experiencing?
Um, so he after a period of like awakening, but during which he was keeping a journal of his dreams and how those sort of led into experiences. So he was a regular person who'd maybe had one or two little somethings, but they didn't have a term for spiritual experiences back then. Then he went through this awakening period, and then his spiritual phase was the last 30 years of his life, and it was like always on. So it seemed like he had a number of different states he went through, but one was kind of like augmented reality, where he would be in the regular world looking around and seeing the same room you would see if you were in there with him. But then he was also aware of the spiritual things around him at the same time. So he could also see and hear the spirits that were around him and talk to them. So that was one. And I think he was in that phase quite a lot. So he could even be at like dinner parties and things, and but also be aware of the spirits that were kind of around people and affecting them. then he would go into what we would call out-of-body experiences, where he would zoom off and into the afterlife and go toward and wouldn't be seeing the room around him or anything. So he would do that. That wasn't continuous, but he would do it like every day. I mean, he'd do it a lot. And then there was a couple of other more obscure states that he talked about where he was sort of like, he'd be writing and he would see like a flame of different colors, which would be indicating how accurate what he was writing was, and that sort of thing. So I think it was almost always, he was almost always in this dual reality, but he became very comfortable with it and very lucid with it so that he could go and function and have his regular life, and he could publish things and write things and do a fair copy and send it to the printer and manage his finances and go out and meet people. So he was got very proficient, but yet sort of always had this, the window was just kind of always open for him.
That makes me, boy, that generates so many questions for me. But one of the things I found out the hard way, that my brain is one of those ones that cannot handle marijuana, because it turns into, it's like a psychedelic for me. And I had just some crazy experiences with marijuana after I got out of the Air Force, and it was legal here in New Jersey, so I tried it a couple of times. But one of the things that happened to me, and one of the reasons why I absolutely had to stay away from it, is I could see, even if I hadn't smoked in weeks, I could see, how do you say this? I could see reality collapsing in to form whatever was there in front of me. So, about like the double slit experiment, and, people say that, particle, like the whole particle and wave and things collapse into matter when they're observed and all that. I could see things collapsing into reality as I looked at them, which is a really, really weird thing, and it would happen sometimes when I was driving, or if, I was just like sitting there having like an absent-minded moment, I'd look around and the tree would just like form in front of me. Like it was like there was no tree there for a second, and I knew that there was a tree because there's always been a tree in my neighbor's yard. But then I would see like the atoms kind of like, and the tree would be there. And I'm like, oh, okay, this is happening now again. This is weird. And then I'm also thinking about, I wish I remembered her name. There was a doctor who had studied, she was a brain scientist, a I forget what they call them, not a neurologist, but she studied the brain. I believe she worked at Harvard, but she had a stroke, and it shut down the right side of her brain.
My Stroke of Insight was the book.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And, but then she was like, just like one with everything. And, it was like this, actually sounds like she was on LSD or something, but it sounded like kind of a profound and scary and beautiful experience all at the same time. And I wonder now if there wasn't something that had happened to Swedenborg's brain, like, I mean, can we duplicate that? Like, was there something in his diet? Like there's that theory that the people, like during the Salem witch trials, that there's a certain chemical that grows in the mold on rye bread, and they suspect that the people had ingested that, and that's what caused these young women to see witches and demons and all this other kind of thing. But I wonder if maybe there wasn't something like in his environment that he was ingesting, or if maybe he had a minor stroke, because he had been like a very prominent Swedish businessman before, right? He was
businessman, inventor, scientist, all the above, mining engineer. Yeah.
One of the things that happened to me, another thing that had happened to me was that I was studying mathematics, deeply studying mathematics, because I had to, my last assignment in the Air Force, I had to write textbooks for people in my career field, for doing like surveyors and, CAD drafting and stuff like that. So they asked me to write a math textbook for people who did, surveying and drafting and, these sorts of things. And I spent about almost 3 months of every day in and day out, all I thought about was mathematics, just working out formulas, working out problems, working out all this kind of stuff. because when you write a book like that, if you know, I'd have to write a test, and I have to write. I think I had to write 400 math questions, but then for every one, I'd have to come up with three. It was multiple choice, so I have to have like the right answer and then three plausible wrong answers. So it was just like a lot of math. And towards the end of that period, I started getting like really weird insights into the nature of reality. Like it started changing how I viewed things, you know. But I wonder too, but I wonder if that maybe it had contributed to Swedenborg's insights. But mostly I'm kind of thinking out loud at this point, but
Yeah, he said that the mechanism by which he was able to have that, he called it having his spiritual eyes opened. That there is some, like, you have a spirit and you have a body, and your spirit has structure and form to it, just like your body. Your spirit is made of spiritual substance, just like the body's made of physical substance. The two are joined at every part, so they interface everywhere. And spiritually, you can have something happen. He called it having the spiritual eyes open, like a covering was peeled off of his eyes, and that's what opened this connection. He said that this is actually a state in which people used to live. Everybody used to have this. I mean, it used to be that thousands of years ago or whenever. This is just how human beings were. You could see into the afterlife. You would get a lot of interaction with people that you knew who had died. You would get sort of direct revelation and dreams and things. But mostly we've shut that because of living in more self-centered and materialistic ways over generations, kind of ruins that connection. But it's something that can be opened up in anyone. There's a mechanism. There's a mechanism, and it should be replicable. He doesn't really give you any information on how to do it, but it's there. It should be there. Like, it's not. He wasn't like some other class of person or something. It's like whatever he did is there in everyone.
Hmm. Wow. I wonder about, man, so many other questions from that too. Um,
Hey,
do you
just
know?
I probably got about
That was
like,
gonna be my next question. Yeah. Do you have
yeah,
like a hard time limit?
yeah, I do. Maybe we could do about like 5 or 6 more minutes if that
Okay.
works. Yeah.
Um, yeah. Well, okay. So let's wrap it up on this then. Well, actually, you know what? Let's tell me about what you do. Tell me about the foundation. Tell me about those sorts of things. Is there anything that you want people to know about?
Oh man. Yeah, so I work for the Swedenborg Foundation, which is a 170-year-old not-for-profit that has been, it was founded by people who love Swedenborg's books. And our mission has been to keep those in print. We're now working on some translation efforts. And the work that I'm doing is sort of a awareness campaign where we're trying to get people to see that Swedenborg is out there, and also help it to distill and explain some of his concepts, because they can be a little bit tricky to do. Mainly I've started this YouTube channel called Off the Left Eye, and then I think we have like 1,500 videos there, 1,400, something like that, of going in and through all the different concepts he had. We interview people. We'll like use diagrams and things to try to get you. I want to get people to the same understanding, insight, and appreciation of the ideas that I have. So, been doing that. You can go to Swedenborg.com. That's the foundation's website. You can download his books for free there as PDFs. So yeah, we're trying to. I feel like basically the world sort of missed Swedenborg. The concepts he has would be relevant in so many discussions. There's so many people are looking for answers that I think he gives pretty good ones on. Some people know about him, but I think there's a lot more people who could and who would benefit from it. So that our mission is to try to create that broader conversation around his ideas and what they might imply.
Wow, that seems like a great mission.
I like
What?
it. Yeah.
Yeah. Is all that content, is that copyright free stuff, or
On YouTube.
yeah, no, well, no, the like the PDFs of his writings.
Oh, yeah. So we have we've got a current translation effort underway called the New Century Edition of Swedenborg's works. This is the first time we've had one group of translators translating his entire set of his 30 volumes of his spiritual works. So his writings themselves are in the public domain. The books we put out, I guess, are copyright, but we give them away as much as we can,
Mm.
so that people can use them. I think there are many of the older translations are available as well. So yeah, there's like we're trying to do the scholarship well so that you actually get the meaning that he had. We're working hard to understand all the terminology, all the Latin, because he wrote in Latin, a couple hundred years ago. So think words of meanings have changed, context has changed. You have to get in there and understand what's this talking about, especially because Swedenborg's material can be, he's talking about stuff nobody's ever seen. And things nobody have ever heard, and to try to translate that across these hundreds of years. So it takes effort and care to really produce something that you're going to understand and that's going to have an impact on you. So we're trying to do that as well as we can. But in the spirit of, this is something we want to lower any barrier to entry on that and get people as much access as they can have to it.
All right. So what would you have then as a closing thought to wrap it up?
Yeah.
On
our whole conversation? Okay. Hey, man, there's more where that came from. There's more where that came from. I feel like we haven't scratched the surface of it.
No, not even a little bit. Yeah.
I hope that what I love about Swedenborg is that, it's way out there, and he talks about having all these OBEs and he's going all over the universe and everything. The lessons he learned, though, are all very practical and accessible to anyone. There's a reason why he doesn't talk about how to induce spiritual experiences, because to him that wasn't the important thing. Yeah, he saw sort of the outer limits of things. It's just like you do physics experiments in these controlled conditions where things are super hot and super small, just so you can figure out the way the regular world works, the principles of the regular world. So to him, all the spirituality and all the spiritual experiences and everything, it boils down to love what's good and seek what is true. And that's how you build heaven in the moment. And do not give into the urge to do what is evil and think what is false. And that's what all spirituality is. So the rest of it is just to bolster our understanding of how to do that and how to keep at it. But the really important stuff is love your neighbor and protect your neighbor from anything in you that might bubble up that would harm them. So that's what I love. It's like anybody anywhere can do that. Go be useful because you love what's being useful, and then heaven's like right there. You don't need to be anybody special to get it.
I like that. That's a good closing thought. Curtis, this was awesome. I had a really good time.
I did too, man. I think I like your earnestness, and you're thinking through this stuff. I feel like I was instantly at ease just us having this conversation. So good on you, and thanks for having me here.
Absolutely. Hopefully we'll have you again sometime. And hopefully, finding Fuscata is, I know it's going to grow because I am, right? This is what I do. And this is Providence.
Yep. I'll be happy to be back. And we'll continue the conversation.
Awesome. Thanks for your time, Curtis.
Thank you. Talk to you later.
Right now, I'm a little bit fanboying. So...